You are not going to believe how this story ends. They thought they could print my face on a fake wanted poster and plaster it all over the neighborhood bulletin boards. Labeling me a security threat? The nerve. They thought they had me devastated. But when the dust settled, it wasn't a lawyer I brought to the next board meeting. It was the actual, bona fide sheriff of the county, standing right beside my son, and the only thing wanted was the chairperson's immediate catastrophic resignation. Stay tuned, because the fallout from this little scheme was absolutely nuclear, and every single cent of their ill-gotten HOA reserve fund was about to be liquidated to pay for their crimes. What's up, drama fam? Before we dive into the most outrageous, illegal, and satisfying HOA revenge story you will ever hear, you know the drill. If you love seeing justice served cold, hit that like button right now, seriously. Smash it until your screen cracks, and make sure you are subscribed. Turn on that notification bell, because this is the kind of drama that you will not want to miss. Let's get into the petty beginnings of a legendary takedown. Our scene opens in the idyllic, manicured suburb of Whisper Creek. It looked like a postcard. But underneath the freshly cut lawns and pristine white fences lurked a darkness. And that darkness had a name: Agnes. Agnes was the self-appointed, an entirely self-important chairperson of the Whisper Creek Homeowners Association. I, Mark, had lived here for 10 peaceful years. My only crime, the spark that ignited this bonfire of injustice, was my mailbox. It was a beautiful, custom-built stone and cedar affair, proved years ago by the previous HOA board, the one that operated with common sense and a modicum of human decency. The problem? Agnes had just pushed through a new, deeply unpopular bylaw mandating standardized black aluminum mailboxes. She considered my unique mailbox a minor point of pride for me, a personal affront to her new vision of sterile, uniform mediocrity. The first salvo was a passive-aggressive letter. Not a fine, not yet. Just a sternly worded notice of non-compliance slipped into the very mailbox she despised. It demanded the immediate, meek-expense replacement of my beautiful custom work with the approved $80 aluminum box from their preferred vendor. I immediately fired back a polite but firm email. I cited the original approval documents, which I had thankfully digitized, and reminded the board that retroactive application of a new bylaw to a grandfathered structure was legally shaky at best, and certainly not covered in the original covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs. That was my first mistake. You see, I treated this like a legal dispute, using facts and logic. Agnes treated it like a blood feud, and logic was simply not in her arsenal. She saw my respectful defense as insubordination. The next week, I received a certified letter. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a $500 fine for failure to remedy non-conforming structure, and a threat to levy a $100 daily fine if the structure was not demolished within 7 days. 7 days? My mailbox? This escalated the entire thing instantly past the point of simple neighborly disagreement and into the realm of financial coercion. I was furious, but I was also busy. I had a demanding job and a son, Kevin, who was home for the summer between semesters of college. Kevin was majoring in criminal justice, a detail Agnes was blissfully unaware of. I told Kevin about the ridiculous fine, and he just shook his head, suggesting I should just pay it to keep the peace. But it wasn't about the $500 anymore. It was about standing up to a bully-wielding, illegitimate authority. I emailed Agnes again, this time copying the entire board and informing them that any attempt to levy further fines or place a lien on my home would be met with an immediate lawsuit for harassment and tortious interference. I included copies of the initial $500 fine and the 7-day threat as evidence of their unreasonable escalation. I thought that would slow them down. That I was the one making the power move. I was wrong. The very next day, a small yet visible surveillance camera appeared, discreetly mounted on a telephone pole directly across the street, pointed squarely at my house. It was a cheap, consumer-grade device, but the message was clear. Agnes was watching, and she was waiting. The subtle escalation of the camera soon gave way to a full-blown declaration of war. Agnes was not used to being challenged, and my threat of a lawsuit was, to her, an act of sheer, unforgivable rebellion. She needed to make an example of me, and she didn't care how far she had to go outside the lines to do it. The following Monday, I returned from work to find not one, but three laminated, full-color 8.5 x 11 posters stapled to the community notice board at the entrance to Whisper Creek. They were professionally designed, almost disturbingly so, with a large grainy photograph of my face, likely captured by that hideous cameraman. A bold, stark headline that read, "Security Threat Advisory. This individual has refused all community standards and is currently under investigation for violations." Below my photo was a bulleted list, ignoring bylaws, repeated offender, threatening board members, verbal, and the truly egregious lie. Potential vandalism risk, observe and report. It was a fake wanted poster, thinly disguised as an official HOA security advisory. They had posted my name, my photo, and my address. The poster included a zoomed-in shot of my house and essentially declared me a pariah, a threat to the safety of the entire community. I stood there, shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief, watching a passing neighbor quickly avert their eyes and hurry away. The public humiliation was immediate and crushing. Agnes hadn't just fined me. She had attempted to destroy my reputation and make my life unlivable in my own neighborhood. I immediately ripped down the posters, every single one I could find, which was nearly a dozen, including one disgracefully placed on a pole right outside the children's playground. But the damage was already done. Later that evening, my son Kevin came home, saw the few shredded remnants I'd missed, and his face went white. He knew this crossed the line far beyond property disputes. This was defamation, pure and simple, and it was malicious. Agnes, emboldened by her despicable act, did not stop there.
Ow.
The next day, two men from an unknown landscaping company arrived with a front loader and began digging up the land around my mailbox. They were technically on the HOA's easement, the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street, but they were digging trenches right up to my property line, and they were deliberately scraping the stone base of my mailbox with their shovels, causing minor but visible cosmetic damage. When I rushed out to confront them, they just shrugged, claiming they were following official instructions to prepare the ground for new utility lines. I knew they were lying. This was simply an act of petty vandalism, disguised as utility work, a constant, irritating reminder of Agnes's power. I called the police, but the officer who showed up just sighed, saying, "Look, sir, this is a civil HOA dispute. You can't intervene unless there's physical violence or a clear, undeniable destruction of property on your side of the line." He suggested I document it and call my lawyer. I felt utterly defeated. It neutralized my legal threats with a blatant act of public defamation, and now they were using a veiled act of vandalism, leveraging the ambiguity of the easement to chip away at my property and my sanity. My son looked at me, his eyes full of sympathy, and said, "Dad, we need a better strategy. This isn't just a bylaw war anymore. This is criminal." I felt helpless, a victim of a coordinated, malicious campaign, with no apparent way to stop the relentless onslaught of petty tyranny. The daily fine counter was ticking, the surveillance camera was watching, and my face was now officially associated with a security threat. Chapter 3. Climax and Resolution. Around 1,500 words. Kevin was right. This wasn't a civil spat. It was bordering on criminal harassment. He took charge. He explained his plan, drawing on his criminal justice studies. "Defamation is hard to prosecute, Dad," he said. "But harassment and misuse of public funds are black and white." Our first move was to gather indisputable evidence. We didn't need to sue the HOA. We needed to expose Agnes to an external, unassailable authority. Kevin meticulously documented every single wanted poster, not just the physical remnants. But he also drove to neighboring communities where Agnes had posted them to ensure maximum embarrassment, capturing high-resolution photographs of them still up, clearly showing my face in the malicious security threat wording. He cross-referenced the printing quality with the HOA's previous meeting minutes, identifying the cost and vendor for the poster as a clear misuse of HOA funds. Crucially, he also researched the security camera. The camera was mounted on a public utility pole, making its purpose and legality highly questionable. Kevin called the utility company, casually inquiring about the requirements for mounting personal surveillance on their infrastructure. They confirmed, definitively, that it was illegal without a specific permit, which the HOA certainly did not have. But the true masterstroke, the reason Kevin's criminal justice degree paid off, was the mailbox incident. Kevin knew that even minor property damage can be a police matter if the intent is proven. He called his professor, who specialized in community law and police procedure. The professor advised, "Forget the HOA mark. That's a civil mess. Focus on the criminal aspect." The minute they posted those flyers, they crossed into harassment territory. But the real key is to bring in someone who understands the criminal code, not just the HOA bylaws. That's when Kevin revealed the ace up his sleeve. His college mentor, the one who encouraged him to go into law enforcement, was none other than Sheriff Robert Jensen, a highly respected figure in the county. Kevin didn't go to the local precinct. He contacted the sheriff directly, explaining the entire outrageous situation: the fake wanted posters, the surveillance on public property, the deliberate property damage disguised as utility work, and the blatant malicious defamation. He presented Sheriff Jensen with the binder full of evidence: the poster photos, the utility company's confirmation about the illegal camera placement, and a detailed estimate for the cosmetic damage to my mailbox base. Sheriff Jensen, a man who loathed petty tyranny and saw the damage this kind of HOA behavior could inflict on community trust, agreed to help. He couldn't act as my personal lawyer, but he could certainly send a powerful message about the limits of authority. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening. Agnes was smug, clearly expecting a timid, defeated Mark to show up and beg for a fine reduction. The meeting began with Agnes droning on about the new mailbox standard. Then, a voice from the back of the room cut through the monotony. "Excuse me, Miss Chairperson, but I believe we have a pressing matter that supersedes the discussion on approved aluminum." Finishes it was Kevin. And right next to him, towering over the folding table, stood Sheriff Jensen in full uniform. The entire room went silent. Agnes's jaw actually dropped. Sheriff Jensen didn't mince words, held up one of the laminated wanted posters. "This document," he stated, his voice booming with authority, "constitutes criminal harassment and defamation. It uses a term, security threat, that implies a criminal warning. A direct misuse of law enforcement terminology." He then turned to Agnes. "Ms. Jones, you are in violation of county ordinances regarding public surveillance and have been documented attempting to unlawfully damage private property." He didn't arrest her. That wasn't his goal. His goal was to apply enough official, undeniable pressure to end her reign. He informed the board in front of 20 witnesses that his office would be launching a formal inquiry into the HOA's operations, specifically focusing on the documented misuse of funds for illegal activities, the posters and the camera, and potential civil rights violations against me. Agnes panicked and red-faced, tried to sputter a defense, but the sheriff simply said, "Save it for my office." Ma'am, the core victory was achieved not in court, but in the most public and humiliating arena possible. Agnes's power was gone the moment the real authority walked in. The immediate fallout was spectacular, a perfect storm of community outrage and bureaucratic panic. Agnes, utterly humiliated and facing a very real legal inquiry, immediately shut down the meeting and the very next morning submitted her resignation. It wasn't just a resignation, it was a hasty retreat from public life. The remaining board members, terrified of being implicated, rushed to distance themselves. Their first official act, before the sun had even set on the day after the meeting, was to formally apologize to me in writing and critically to unilaterally rescind every single fine levied against my property, effective immediately. They also, without my even asking, approved the removal of the surveillance camera and sent a maintenance crew to professionally and discreetly repair the cosmetic damage the landscapers had caused to my mailbox's stone base. But the true payback came from the investigation. Sheriff Jensen's inquiry, while focusing on the criminal aspects, triggered an internal audit demanded by the now petrified board members. The audit revealed a mountain of financial irregularities: the expensive printing of the illegal posters, the unbudgeted purchase of the illegal camera, and the kicker, massive, unauthorized expenditure for a board retreat to a high-end spa resort that Agnes had cleverly disguised as a community infrastructure planning session. The total cost of Agnes's petty abuses, including the ill-gotten spa trip, came to nearly $15,000 of the HOA's reserve funds. The board, desperate to show the sheriff's office and the community they were serious about accountability, sued Agnes themselves to recover the misused funds. The settlement was swift and brutal. Agnes was forced to repay the entire $15,000, which went directly back into the community's dwindling coffers. She wasn't just removed from power. She was financially ruined by the very association she sought to control. The public shaming was the cherry on top. A local news station, tipped off by a sympathetic neighbor, ran a segment about the HOA wanted poster scandal, featuring an interview with me where I calmly detailed the malicious harassment. They showed a blurred-out picture of Agnes, but everyone in Whisper Creek knew exactly who it was. The community forum, which was previously a quiet place for lost dogs and garage sale announcements, exploded into a bonfire of criticism. Agnes was relentlessly shamed, forcing her to delete her social media accounts and eventually to stop leaving her house entirely. The payback was complete: financial restitution, public humiliation, and the total immediate collapse of her authority. She got exactly what she deserved for crossing the line from petty neighbor to malicious criminal. The long-term aftermath was a lesson in permanent justice. Agnes, unable to bear the constant shame and the knowledge that she was now seen not as a leader, but as a disgraced thief and bully, put her house on the market 3 months later. The HOA Scandal House, as it was known, sold for well under the asking price. As she drove out of Whisper Creek for the final time, I watched from my front window. But the final nail in her coffin wasn't just her leaving. It was the institutional change that Kevin, my brilliant son, helped bring about. He assisted the newly elected, humble, and reasonable interim board in drafting a series of sweeping amendments to the HOA bylaws. The first and most critical amendment was a harassment and defamation clause that explicitly defined and severely penalized any board member who used HOA resources or positioned to maliciously defame or harass a resident, with mandatory removal and financial penalty as the consequence. The second was the creation of a permanent, independent ethics and oversight committee, explicitly designed to review all board expenditures over a certain amount, preventing any future spa retreats or illegal camera purchases. My custom stone mailbox still stands today, a quiet, stately monument to the fight for personal liberty and property rights. No one ever mentioned the standardized aluminum boxes again. It became a symbol. And as for Agnes, she moved to a different county, far away, and was reportedly banned for life from serving on any board in her new community after her past record became public. The story of the fake wanted posters, the sheriff's dramatic entrance, and the nuclear financial payback became a legendary whisper in Whisper Creek. It was a permanent warning to all future HOA busybodies. If you cross the line from governance to malicious persecution, the consequences will be total, humiliating, and everlasting. The final satisfying victory wasn't just my mailbox. It was the permanent sanitization of the entire community's governance, all thanks to a simple, outrageous act of defamation that brought the sheriff himself to the table. Wow, could you believe that? A fake wanted poster brought down an entire HOA? That is pure gold, folks. Let me know in the comments below, what was the most shocking moment? Was it the moment the sheriff walked in? Or the $15,000 financial payback? Hit that subscribe button right now if you want more stories of epic HOA takedowns. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you miss the next time a Karen meets her match. Thanks for watching.